In the last episode of a tale that would change the course of human history, the once blue skies of Earth had given way to a toxic haze, a constant reminder of the devastation that had ravaged the planet. The remnants of society struggled to survive, and it seemed as though all hope was lost. Yet, in the shadows, a figure emerged, destined to alter the fate of humanity forever. Ambrose Wynter stood at the edge of the rooftop, the wind whipping his hair into a frenzy as he gazed out upon the desolate landscape. The skyscrapers, once symbols of human ingenuity and progress, now stood as skeletal sentinels, a grim reminder of what had been lost. How did it come to this? He thought, the weight of his responsibilities threatening to crush him. The city, once a hub of activity, was now a mere shadow of its former self. The streets were empty, save for the scattered groups of survivors who eked out a meager existence in the ruins. The air reeked of smoke and desperation. As Ambrose Wynter, he had always been driven by a fierce determination to succeed. His charisma and intelligence had made him a magnet for those seeking a way out of the darkness. And now, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, he was their best hope. His eyes scanned the horizon, his mind racing with the challenges ahead. The technology that had once been the hallmark of human progress now seemed like a distant memory. The remnants of the old world were but a faint glow in the darkness. He recalled the whispers of a long-lost project, one that had promised to restore the planet to its former glory. The scientists had spoken of a revolutionary technology, one that could reverse the damage and revive the dying planet. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and the world was forever changed. A gentle breeze carried the sound of footsteps behind him. He turned to see Maya, his trusted ally, approaching him with a look of determination etched on her face. "Ambrose, we have a problem," she said, her voice low and urgent. He raised an eyebrow, his instincts on high alert. "What is it?" "The scouts have reported a strange energy signature emanating from the old laboratory on the outskirts of the city. We think it might be a lead on the technology we need." Ambrose's eyes narrowed as he processed the information. It was a risk, but one they couldn't afford to ignore. He made his decision. "Let's gear up and take a look." As they descended into the ruins, the silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. The air was thick with the stench of decay and neglect. They moved cautiously, their senses on high alert, as they navigated the treacherous landscape. The laboratory loomed ahead, its entrance a massive metal door that seemed to yawn open like the maw of a beast. Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. "You think it's safe?" Ambrose's gaze locked onto the door, his mind racing with possibilities. "I don't know, but we have to try." With a deep breath, he pushed open the door and they stepped into the unknown. The interior was dimly lit, the only sound the soft hum of machinery. Ambrose's eyes adjusted slowly, revealing rows of workstations, each one a testament to human ingenuity. And then he saw it. A massive, cylindrical device, its surface etched with strange symbols, pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Maya's voice was full of awe. "What is that?" Ambrose's gaze was fixed on the device, his mind racing with the implications. "I think it's the key to our survival." As they approached the device, a low rumble began to build, the air vibrating with energy. Ambrose felt a shiver run down his spine. Suddenly, the device erupted into a blaze of light and Ambrose felt himself being pulled towards it. He tried to resist, but it was too late. The world around him dissolved into chaos and Ambrose Wynter was left with more questions than answers. What had he just gotten himself into? As the light faded, Ambrose found himself standing in a vast, alien landscape. The sky was a deep, burning red, and the ground beneath his feet was dry, cracked earth. Maya's voice was beside him, laced with concern. "Ambrose, what's happening?" He turned to her, his mind reeling. "I don't know, but I think we've just been given a chance to change the course of history." The air was thick with an otherworldly energy and Ambrose could feel it calling to him. He raised his eyes to the horizon and a sense of purpose burned within him. It was time to forge a new path, one that would lead humanity out of the darkness and into the unknown. The journey had begun, and Ambrose Wynter was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But little did he know, the true test of his leadership was only just beginning. As they stood there, the alien landscape stretching out before them, Ambrose felt a sense of trepidation. What lay ahead? Would they find allies or enemies? The silence was broken by Maya's voice, her words laced with a sense of wonder. "Look, Ambrose." He followed her gaze, and his eyes widened as he saw it. A fleet of ships, their designs unlike anything he had ever seen, was emerging from the horizon. It seemed they were not alone in the universe. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and Ambrose Wynter was about to make a decision that would change the course of history forever. The journey had just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. But for now, Ambrose stood tall, his eyes fixed on the horizon, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with nothing but his wit, his charisma, and an unyielding determination to lead humanity to a brighter future. In this desolate yet strangely beautiful alien landscape, Ambrose Wynter stood poised on the threshold of a new era, one that would be marked by trials and tribulations, but also by hope and the unyielding resilience of the human spirit. The universe stretched out before him like an uncharted sea, full of mysteries and dangers, but also full of possibilities. And Ambrose Wynter, the man who had emerged as a beacon of hope in a ravaged world, was ready to set sail into the unknown. As he stood there, the wind whispering secrets in his ear, Ambrose felt an unshakable sense of determination. He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with peril, but he was undaunted. The fate of humanity rested on his shoulders, and he was ready to bear the weight. The ships drew closer, their strange angular designs becoming clearer with every passing moment. Ambrose's eyes narrowed, his mind racing with questions. Who were these aliens? Were they friend or foe? Maya's hand on his arm brought him back to reality. "Ambrose, we need to be careful," she whispered. He nodded, his eyes never leaving the ships. "I know, Maya. We don't know what we're dealing with here." As the ships landed, a contingent of alien beings emerged. They were tall, their skin a deep, iridescent blue, and their eyes seemed to bore into Ambrose's very soul. One of them, clearly the leader, stepped forward. It spoke in a language that was unintelligible to Ambrose, but Maya's eyes lit up with understanding. She turned to Ambrose, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thayer, the Zorvathians, Ambrose. Thayer offering us an alliance." Ambrose's eyes narrowed, his mind racing with the implications. "What do they want in return?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. Maya's eyes darted back to the Zorvathian leader and then back to Ambrose. "They want our help in defeating their enemies, the Zeridians. In return, they'll give us the technology we need to restore Earth." Ambrose's eyes locked onto the Zorvathian leader, his mind racing with possibilities. It was a risk, but one they couldn't afford to ignore. He made his decision. "Let's do it," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "We'll form an alliance with the Zorvathians, and we'll take back what's rightfully ours." The Zorvathian leader's face split into a wide, toothy grin, and Ambrose knew that the fate of humanity had just taken a drastic turn. As they forged the alliance, Ambrose couldn't shake off the feeling that they were walking into a trap. But he pushed the doubts aside, focusing on the prize, the restoration of Earth and the rise of humanity to its rightful place among the stars. The journey had just begun, and Ambrose Wynter was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But little did he know, the true test of his leadership was only just beginning as the Zorvathian leader extended a long, slender hand. Ambrose grasped it firmly, sealing the alliance. The alien's grip was surprisingly strong, and Ambrose felt a jolt of electricity run through his arm. Maya's eyes sparkled with excitement as she translated the Zorvathian leader's words. "Thayer offering us advanced technology. Ambrose, energy shields, faster-than-light travel, and advanced medical facilities." Ambrose's mind raced with the possibilities. With this technology, they could not only restore Earth but also expand humanity's reach across the galaxy. But as they began to discuss the finer details of the alliance, Ambrose's instincts started to twitch. There was something off about the Zorvathians, something they weren't telling him. He pushed the doubts aside, focusing on the prize. After all, didn't the end justify the means? But as he looked into the Zorvathian leader's eyes, he saw a glimmer of something that sent a shiver down his spine. Over the next few weeks, the humans and Zorvathians worked tirelessly to implement the new technology. Earth's ecosystems began to heal at an alarming rate, and humanity's confidence grew with each passing day. But Ambrose couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being watched, that the Zorvathians were hiding something from him. He began to notice small inconsistencies in their stories, tiny cracks in their facade. One night, as he strolled through the gardens of the newly restored New Eden, he stumbled upon a group of Zorvathians huddled in a quiet corner. They were speaking in hushed tones, their words incomprehensible to Ambrose. But Maya, who stood beside him, caught his eye and nodded discreetly. "I think I know what Thayer's saying, Ambrose," she whispered. "Thayer talking about the Zeridians. Thayer not just enemies, Thayer a threat to the entire galaxy." Ambrose's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. "The Zeridians are not just a rival species, Thayer a hive mind. Thayer a collective consciousness driven by a single purpose, to consume and assimilate all other life forms." A chill ran down Ambrose's spine. "And what does this have to do with the Zorvathians?" Maya's eyes locked onto his. "The Zorvathians are not just allies, Thayer the Zeridians' natural predators. They've been fighting them for centuries, trying to keep them at bay." Ambrose's mind reeled as the pieces fell into place. The Zorvathians weren't just helping humanity out of the goodness of their hearts, they needed humanity's help to defeat the Zeridians. And Ambrose had just walked into their trap. He felt a cold sweat trickle down his spine as he realized the true nature of the alliance. The Zorvathians didn't care about humanity's rise to power, they cared about using humanity as pawns in their own game of survival. Ambrose's eyes locked onto the Zorvathian leader, who stood a short distance away, watching him with an unsettling intensity. He knew that he had to make a choice to continue playing along or to forge a new path. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and Ambrose knew that the time for hesitation was over. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. It was time to rewrite the rules of the game. As he gazed into the Zorvathian leader's eyes, Ambrose's resolve hardened. He couldn't let humanity remain a pawn in their game of survival. The time for caution was over. It was time to take control. Maya sensed the shift in his demeanor and stepped closer, her eyes locked onto his. "What are you going to do, Ambrose?" Ambrose's jaw clenched as he formulated a plan. "I'll play along, for now. But I need you to dig deeper, Maya. Find out everything you can about the Zeridians, their motivations, their weaknesses. We need an edge, and we need it fast." Maya nodded, her face set with determination. "I'm on it, Ambrose, but what about the Zorvathians? How will you handle them?" Ambrose's smile was cold, calculated. "I'll use them, Maya. I'll use their technology, their resources, and their influence. But I'll do it on my terms, not theirs." As he turned to leave, the Zorvathian leader's eyes narrowed, sensing the change in Ambrose's demeanor. But Ambrose didn't care. He had a plan, and he was ready to put it into action. Over the next few weeks, Ambrose played the role of the grateful ally, publicly praising the Zorvathians for their help. But behind the scenes, he was secretly gathering intelligence, forging new alliances, and building a network of loyal supporters. Maya's research yielded a treasure trove of information about the Zeridians. Ambrose learned that their hive mind was vulnerable to a specific frequency of energy, and that their collective consciousness could be disrupted by a powerful enough signal. With this knowledge, Ambrose set out to create a device that could harness this energy, a device that could potentially give humanity the upper hand against the Zeridians. As the device neared completion, Ambrose knew that the time for subtlety was over. He called a meeting with the Zorvathian leader, his heart pounding with anticipation. The The two leaders faced each other, their eyes locked in a silent challenge. Ambrose knew that this was it, this was the moment of truth. "I have a proposal," Ambrose said, his voice calm, confident. "Let's work together to take down the Ziridians. Let's show them that we're a united front, a force to be reckoned with." The Zorvathian leader's expression was unreadable, but Ambrose could sense the hesitation. And then, in a flash of insight, he knew why. "You're afraid of us," Ambrose said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're afraid that if we work together, humanity will surpass you, that we'll become the dominant force in the galaxy." The Zorvathian leader's mask slipped, revealing a glimmer of fear. And in that moment, Ambrose knew that he had won. "I'm not afraid of you," the alien said, its voice laced with venom, "but I will not be threatened. And if you continue to push us, humanity will suffer the consequences." Ambrose smiled, his heart racing with excitement. The game was on and he was ready to play. "I'm shaking in my boots," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But I'll give you one thing: you're a worthy adversary. And I'll enjoy watching you fall." As the meeting came to a close, Ambrose felt a thrill of adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had goaded the Zorvathian leader, pushed its buttons, and revealed its true intentions. The gauntlet had been thrown, and Ambrose was ready to take on the challenge. As he left the meeting room, Maya was waiting for him, her eyes shining with excitement. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're afraid of us," Ambrose replied, a sly grin spreading across his face. "They're afraid of what we can become." Maya's eyes widened in understanding. "So what's the plan?" Ambrose's smile grew wider. "We take the fight to them. We show them that humanity won't be intimidated, won't be threatened. We'll make them regret underestimating us." Maya nodded, her face set with determination. "I'm with you, Ambrose. Whatever it takes, we'll make it happen." Together they began to mobilize their allies, to gather resources, and to prepare for the upcoming battle. Ambrose knew that it wouldn't be easy, but he was confident in his plan. He had outmaneuvered the Zorvathians, and now it was time to take the next step. As the days turned into weeks, tensions escalated. The Zorvathians began to make aggressive moves, testing humanity's defenses, probing for weaknesses. Ambrose knew that it was only a matter of time before they made their move. And then, one morning, the attack came. A massive fleet of Zorvathian ships appeared on the horizon, their engines blazing as they bore down on humanity's stronghold. Ambrose stood on the edge of the city, his heart pounding in his chest. As he gazed out at the approaching armada, "This is it," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of the engines. "This is our moment of truth." Maya stood beside him, her eyes locked onto his. "We're ready, Ambrose. We'll fight to the end." Ambrose nodded, his jaw clenched in determination. "We'll show them what humanity is capable of. We'll show them what it means to be human." The battle raged on, the sounds of blasters and explosions echoing through the air. Ambrose stood at the forefront, his eyes fixed on the enemy, as he rallied his troops and led the charge. The outcome was far from certain, but one thing was clear: only one side would emerge victorious. And Ambrose was determined to make sure it was humanity that stood tall in the end. The smoke from the explosions hung heavy in the air as Ambrose sprinted from one command center to the next, his footsteps echoing off the walls. Maya kept pace beside him, her eyes darting between the holographic displays projecting battle statistics and the real-time feeds from the front lines. "Ambrose, we're taking heavy losses on the eastern flank." A panicked voice shouted from the comms console. "Redirect reinforcements from Sector 3, Ambrose barked, his eyes flashing with intensity. "We need to hold that line." Maya nodded, her fingers flying across the console as she relayed the orders. Ambrose turned to face her, his expression grim. "We can't keep this up for much longer. We need to find a way to take out their command ship." Maya's eyes met his, a spark of determination igniting within them. "I have an idea," she whispered. Ambrose's gaze locked onto hers, his heart racing with anticipation. "What is it?" Maya's voice dropped to a whisper, her words tumbling out in a rush. I've been analyzing the Zorvathian fleet's communications patterns. I think I can hack into their system, create a temporary backdoor that would give us access to their command ship's coordinates. Ambrose's eyes widened, a sly grin spreading across his face. "Do it," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. Maya nodded, her fingers flying across the console as she worked her magic. Ambrose turned to face the battle-scarred cityscape, his heart pounding in his chest. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and Ambrose was about to take a gamble that would change the course of history. "Maya, how much longer?" he whispered, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Almost there," Ambrose, Maya replied, her voice laced with tension. "Just a few more seconds." The air seemed to vibrate with anticipation as Maya's fingers hovered over the console, poised to unleash a digital storm that would either turn the tide of battle or seal humanity's fate. And then, in an instant, it was done. Maya's eyes flashed with triumph as she turned to face Ambrose. "I've got the coordinates," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the battle. Ambrose's grin grew wider, his heart racing with excitement. "It's time to take out the trash," he whispered, his voice dripping with malice. Together they began to mobilize their forces to prepare for the final push. The outcome was far from certain, but one thing was clear. Only one side would emerge victorious, and Ambrose was determined to make sure it was humanity that stood tall in the end. As the battle raged on, Ambrose's eyes locked onto the horizon, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. This was the moment of truth. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and Ambrose was about to take the ultimate gamble. The silence between Maya and Ambrose was palpable, heavy with anticipation as they gazed out at the ravaged cityscape. The din of battle raged on, a constant reminder of the stakes, but in this moment it felt distant, muffled. "Get me General Ortega on the comms," Ambrose whispered, his voice low and even. Maya nodded, her eyes darting to the console as she swiftly complied. The holographic display flickered to life, General Ortega's weathered face materializing before them. "Ambrose, what's the play?" the general asked, his voice laced with a mixture of urgency and curiosity. "We have the coordinates, General," Ambrose replied, his eyes never leaving the horizon. "Prepare the strike team. We're going to take out that command ship once and for all." General Ortega's face set in a determined mask. "You got it, Ambrose. Mobilize the team. We'll be ready to move in 5. The connection terminated and Ambrose turned to Maya. "I need you to hack into the Zorvathian comms system, create a diversion to draw their attention away from our strike team." Maya nodded, her fingers flying across the console as she worked her magic. Ambrose watched her, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. This was the moment that would decide the course of history. The minutes ticked by, slow and agonizing. Ambrose's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, his mind racing with the possibilities. What if they failed? What if? Maya's voice cut through his thoughts, her words laced with a sense of urgency. "Ambrose, I've got the diversion ready. On your mark." Ambrose took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto Maya's. "Now," he whispered. The air seemed to vibrate with tension as Maya activated the diversion. A blast of static erupted from the comms console, followed by a garbled message in an alien tongue. The Zorvathian fleet's response was immediate, their ships adjusting course to investigate the sudden anomaly. Ambrose's gaze snapped back to the horizon, his heart racing with excitement. It was time. "General Ortega, this is Ambrose," he whispered, his voice carried away by the wind. "It's go time. Take out that command ship." The response was immediate, a chorus of affirmative responses from the strike team. Ambrose's eyes locked onto the horizon, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. This was the moment of truth. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and Ambrose was about to take the ultimate gamble. As the strike team launched their attack, a burst of light illuminated the horizon. Ambrose's heart skipped a beat, his eyes fixed on the unfolding spectacle. This was it. This was the end game. And Ambrose was about to emerge victorious, or so he thought. For as the light faded, a strange, ominous glow began to emanate from the heart of the Zorvathian fleet, a glow that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. "Maya, what's going on?" Ambrose whispered, his voice laced with unease. Maya's eyes snapped to the console, her face pale. "I don't know, Ambrose. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." The air seemed to vibrate with an unsettling energy, as if the very fabric of reality was beginning to unravel. Ambrose's heart raced with a growing sense of unease. Something was wrong, something was very wrong, and Ambrose was about to find out just how wrong. "Scan for any anomalies," Ambrose ordered, his voice tight with concern. Maya's fingers flew across the console, her eyes darting between the holographic displays. "I'm trying, Ambrose, but whatever this is, it's not showing up on our sensors." The ominous glow continued to pulse, casting an eerie light over the ravaged cityscape. Ambrose's instincts screamed warning, telling him to get out, to retreat and regroup. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this was it. This was the moment he had been searching for. "General Ortega, report," Ambrose called out, his voice laced with a growing sense of urgency. The general's voice came back, laced with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Ambrose, we're reading some kind of energy surge from the Zorvathian fleet. It's unlike anything we've seen before." "I know," Ambrose replied, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I can see it from here. Keep your team on high alert. If this is some kind of trap, we need to be ready to adapt." The air seemed to vibrate with an electric sense of tension, as if the very fabric of reality was about to tear apart. Ambrose's heart raced with a growing sense of unease, his mind racing with the possibilities. And then, without warning, the glow vanished. The sudden silence was deafening, the only sound the distant rumble of the battle raging on. Ambrose's eyes locked onto the horizon, his heart pounding in his chest. "What just happened?" Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. Ambrose shook his head, his eyes never leaving the horizon. "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." As if on cue, a massive ship emerged from the heart of the Zorvathian fleet. It was unlike anything Ambrose had ever seen, its hull a twisted mass of metal and energy. "Identify that ship," Ambrose ordered, his voice tight with concern. Maya's eyes darted to the console, her fingers flying across the holographic displays. "Ambrose, I'm reading a Zorvathian Emperor-class vessel." Ambrose's heart skipped a beat, his mind racing with the implications. An Emperor-class vessel was the most powerful ship in the Zorvathian fleet, a symbol of their empire's strength and dominance, and it was heading straight for them. "General Ortega, we have a problem," Ambrose called out, his voice laced with urgency. The general's response was immediate, his voice laced with a sense of determination. "Ambrose, we're on it." "Well, take out that ship and—" "No, General," Ambrose cut in, his voice firm. "We need to fall back. Now." The general's response was immediate, his voice laced with a mixture of concern and confusion. "Ambrose, what's going on? Why are we retreating?" Ambrose's eyes locked onto the horizon, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew what was coming, knew that this was the moment of truth. "We're not retreating, General," Ambrose replied, his voice cold and calculated. "We're regrouping, and we're going to come back stronger than ever." The Emperor-class vessel loomed large on the horizon, its presence casting a dark shadow over the ravaged cityscape. Ambrose's heart raced with a growing sense of unease, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew what was coming. He knew that this was the end game, and he was ready to play. "I want updates on the retreat, General," Ambrose called out, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Retreat is in progress, Ambrose," the general replied, his voice laced with a sense of urgency. "Our forces are falling back to the designated coordinates." Ambrose nodded, his mind racing with the implications. He knew that the Zorvathian Emperor-class vessel was a game-changer, a symbol of their empire's strength and dominance, and he knew that they had to be strategic in their response. "Maya, can you hack into the Zorvathian systems?" Ambrose asked, his eyes locked onto the console. Maya's fingers flew across the holographic displays, her eyes darting between the screens. "I'm trying, Ambrose, but their systems are heavily encrypted." Ambrose's heart sank, his mind racing with the possibilities. They needed to know what the Zorvathians were planning, needed to stay one step ahead of them. The air seemed to vibrate with an electric sense of tension, as if the very fabric of reality was about to tear apart. Ambrose's heart raced with a growing sense of unease, his mind racing with the possibilities. And then, without warning, the Emperor-class vessel vanished from the horizon. The sudden silence was deafening, the only sound the distant rumble of the battle raging on. Ambrose's eyes locked onto the horizon, his heart pounding in his chest. "What just happened?" Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. Ambrose shook his head, his eyes never leaving the horizon. "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." As if on cue, a message flashed on the console, the words flashing in bold red. "Incoming transmission from Zorvathian Emperor," the console read. Ambrose's heart skipped a beat, his mind racing with the implications. What did the Zorvathian Emperor want to say? "Do we accept the transmission?" Maya asked, her voice laced with a sense of caution. Ambrose nodded, his eyes fixed on the console. "We have to know what they want." The console beeped, and a holographic projection of the Zorvathian Emperor appeared before them. His eyes were cold, calculating, and his voice sent shivers down Ambrose's spine. "Greetings, Ambrose Wynter," the Emperor said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I am Zorvine, ruler of the Zorvathian Empire. And you, Ambrose Wynter, are a relic of a bygone era." Ambrose's eyes locked onto the Emperor's, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that this was the moment of truth, the moment when the fate of humanity would be decided. "I am not afraid of you, Zorvine," Ambrose replied, his voice cold and calculated. The Emperor's eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with condescension. "You should be, Ambrose Wynter, for you are about to witness the dawn of a new era, an era in which humanity is nothing but a footnote in the annals of history." Ambrose's heart raced with a growing sense of unease, his mind racing with the implications. He knew that this was the end game, the moment when the fate of humanity would be decided, and he was ready to play. The Emperor's words hung in the air like a challenge, the silence between them a heavy, palpable thing. Ambrose's eyes never wavered, his gaze locked onto the Zorvathian ruler as if daring him to make his next move. "I think you'll find, Zorvine," Ambrose said, his voice low and even, "that humanity has a way of rising to the occasion. We've been written off before, and yet we're still here." Zorvine's expression remained impassive, but Ambrose detected a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "You are no match for the might of the Zorvathian Empire," the Emperor sneered. "Your petty squabbles and internal divisions make you weak. We will crush you, Ambrose Wynter, and your empire will be nothing but a memory." Ambrose smiled, a cold, calculated smile. "You're not the first to underestimate us, Zorvine, and you won't be the last. But let me tell you something: humanity has a secret weapon, something that will give us the edge we need to take you down." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, his interest piqued despite himself. "And what might that be, Ambrose Wynter?" he drawled. Ambrose leaned forward, his eyes glinting with determination. "That, Zorvine, is for me to know and you to find out. But rest assured, we will not go quietly into the night. We will fight and we will win." The Emperor's face twisted into a snarl, his voice rising to a shout. "You are no match for us, Ambrose Wynter. You are nothing but a fleeting moment in the annals of time. We will crush you and your empire will be dust." The transmission ended abruptly, the holographic projection disappearing as suddenly as it had appeared. Ambrose's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, his mind racing with the implications. Maya's voice was barely audible, her words laced with a sense of fear. "Ambrose, what's going on? What did he mean?" Ambrose turned to her, his eyes cold and calculating. "I think, Maya, that the Zorvathians are about to make their move, and we need to be ready." The air seemed to vibrate with tension, the silence between them heavy with anticipation. Ambrose's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing with the possibilities. And then, without warning, the console beeped again. The words flashed on the screen, the message echoing through the silence. Incoming attack fleet detected, the console read. Zorvathian fleet closing in on human coordinates. Ambrose's eyes locked onto the horizon, his heart racing with a growing sense of urgency. The game was afoot, and humanity was about to face its greatest challenge yet. "Maya, get me General Ortega on the comms," Ambrose barked, his voice sharp and commanding. "We need to mobilize our defenses and fast." Maya nodded, her fingers flying across the console. The general's voice was immediate, his words laced with a sense of urgency. "Ambrose, we're detecting multiple Zorvathian vessels closing in on our position. We need to move and fast." Ambrose's eyes never wavered, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew that this was the moment of truth, the moment when humanity would rise or fall. "Get our people to safety, General," Ambrose ordered, his voice cold and calculated. "Well, hold off the Zorvathians as long as we can." The general's voice was a nod, his words laced with determination. "Well, hold the line. Ambrose, you can count on us." Ambrose's heart raced with a growing sense of urgency, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew that this was the end game, the moment when humanity would rise or fall, and he was ready to play. The Emperor's words still echoed in Ambrose's mind as he turned to Maya, his eyes blazing with determination. "Get me a status report on our defenses," he ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. "I want to know what we're up against." Maya nodded, her fingers flying across the console. The data flashed on the screen, the numbers and statistics streaming past in a blur. "Thayer coming at us with a full fleet," Maya reported, her voice laced with tension. "Multiple capital ships, escort vessels, and fighter squadrons. We're looking at a force of at least 500 vessels, Ambrose." Ambrose's eyes narrowed, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew that humanity's chances of survival hung in the balance, and he was determined to come out on top. "Get our fleet commanders online," Ambrose ordered, his voice cold and calculated. "We need to coordinate our defense and take out their command ships first." Maya nodded, her fingers flying across the console. The faces of humanity's top fleet commanders appeared on the screen, their eyes locked onto Ambrose. "We're with you, Ambrose," Admiral Patel said, her voice steady and calm. "Well, hold the line." Ambrose's gaze swept across the faces, his heart pounding with a growing sense of urgency. He knew that this was the moment of truth, the moment when humanity would rise or fall. "Remember, our goal is to take out their command ships," Ambrose reiterated. "Once we do that, their fleet will be in disarray. We can take them down one by one." The fleet commanders nodded, their faces set with determination. Ambrose knew that they were ready to face whatever the Zorvathians threw their way. "Let's get to it," Ambrose said, his voice cold and calculated. "We've got an empire to defend." The transmission ended and Ambrose turned to Maya. "Get me a direct line to the Zorvathian Emperor," he ordered, his voice low and even. Maya's eyes widened in surprise, but she nodded. "Yes, Ambrose." The console beeped and the Emperor's face appeared on the screen. His expression was twisted into a snarl, his eyes blazing with hatred. "You're a fool, Ambrose Wynter," the Emperor spat. "You think you can take on the might of the Zorvathian Empire? Well, crush you like the insignificant insects you are." Ambrose smiled, a cold, calculated smile. "I think you'll find, Zorvine," he said, "that humanity has a way of surprising you, and we're not going down without a fight." The Emperor's face twisted into a rage, his voice rising to a shout. "You're nothing but a fleeting moment in the annals of time. We'll erase you from existence." The transmission ended and Ambrose turned to Maya. "Get me a status report on our defenses," he ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. Maya nodded, her fingers flying across the console. The data flashed on the screen, the numbers and statistics streaming past in a blur. "We're holding our own," Maya reported, her voice laced with tension. "But the Zorvathians are pushing hard. We can't hold out for much longer." Ambrose's eyes narrowed, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew that humanity's chances of survival hung in the balance and he was determined to come out on top. "Get me General Ortega on the comms," Ambrose ordered, his voice cold and calculated. "We need to make a last-ditch effort to take out their command ships." The general's voice was immediate, his words laced with determination. "We're on it, Ambrose. Well, take them down or die trying." Ambrose's heart raced with a growing sense of urgency, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew that this was the end game, the moment when humanity would rise or fall. And he was ready to play. "All right, General," Ambrose said, his voice firm and resolute. "Here's the plan. We'll concentrate our firepower on the lead command ship. If we can take it out, the rest of their fleet will be in disarray. We can pick them off one by one." There was a pause, and then General Ortega's voice came back, laced with a hint of skepticism. "Ambrose, are you sure that's the best plan? We're outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on resources. We're taking a huge risk." Ambrose's eyes narrowed, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew that Ortega was right, but he also knew that they had no choice. This was their last stand, and they had to make it count. "I'm aware of the risks, General," Ambrose said, his voice cold and calculated. "But we have no other option. We have to take out that command ship if we want to survive. Are you with me?" There was a pause, and then Ortega's voice came back, laced with determination. "I'm with you, Ambrose. We'll make it happen." Ambrose's heart raced with a growing sense of urgency. He knew that this was it, the final countdown. He turned to Maya, his eyes locking onto hers. "Get me a status report on our fighter squadrons," he ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. "I want to know what we're looking at in terms of numbers and firepower." Maya nodded, her fingers flying across the console. The data flashed on the screen, the numbers and statistics streaming past in a blur. "We've got 3 squadrons of fighters ready to go," Maya reported, her voice laced with tension. "But we're running low on fuel and ammo. We can't keep this up for much longer." Ambrose's eyes narrowed, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew that they were running out of time and they had to act fast. "Get the fighters scrambled," Ambrose ordered, his voice cold and calculated. "We'll make a final push to take out that command ship. It's now or never." The room fell silent, the only sound the hum of the consoles and the quiet beeping of the machinery. Ambrose's heart raced with anticipation, his mind locked onto the task at hand. This was it, the moment of truth. Humanity's fate hung in the balance, and Ambrose was determined to come out on top. The fighters roared to life, their engines screaming as they lifted off from the launch bay. Ambrose watched, his eyes locked onto the screen as the tiny ships hurtled towards the Zorvathian fleet. The battle was intense, the ships clashing in a fiery inferno of laser blasts and explosions. Ambrose's heart raced with a growing sense of urgency, his mind locked onto the outcome. And then, in a flash of insight, Ambrose knew what he had to do. He turned to Maya, his eyes blazing with determination. "Get me a direct line to the Zorvathian Emperor," he ordered, his voice low and even. Maya's eyes widened in surprise, but she nodded. The console beeped and the Emperor's face appeared on the screen. Ambrose smiled, a cold, calculated smile. "It's over, Zorvine," he said. "You've lost. Humanity is the superior species and we're going to prove it to you." The Emperor's face twisted into a snarl, his eyes blazing with hatred. "You're nothing but a fleeting moment in the annals of time," he spat. "We'll erase you from existence." Ambrose's smile grew wider, his heart pounding with excitement. He knew that he had won, that humanity had emerged victorious. "No, Zorvine," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're the one who's fleeting. Humanity is the future and we're just getting started." The transmission ended, and Ambrose turned to Maya. His eyes locked onto hers and he smiled. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with pride and accomplishment. "We've secured our place in the galaxy. Humanity is the dominant species and we're never going back." Maya's eyes shone with tears, her face radiant with joy. "You did it, Ambrose," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved us all." Ambrose's heart swelled with emotion, his mind racing with the possibilities. He knew that this was just the beginning, that humanity would go on to achieve great things. and he was proud to be a part of it.